Welcome to the Politics Guys. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. We start this listener mail episode with the fallout from what has been by far the most controversial of the 176 shows we've done to this date. It's hard to believe it's been that many. I know, it's wow. But my interview with conservative townhall.com columnist Kurt Schlichter upset many of my fellow liberals, a number of whom wrote emails, commented on Facebook and Twitter, and posted comments on the episode link on politicsguys.com. Now, first off, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to respond. The fact that you did tells us that you're passionate about what we do on the show, or at least what we try to do. And when you feel we've fallen down on the job, you care enough to let us know. And that matters. If it just would have been, the response just would have been crickets, that would have been probably not a very good thing, I don't think. So first, the positive responses. Believe it or not, there were some. A number of listeners said that they appreciated hearing a different sort of voice on the show. Someone who, whether they agreed with him or not, was representative of how a large number of Americans feel. And that was exactly my intent in asking Mr. Schlichter on the show, to provide a sort of conservative viewpoint that you certainly won't hear from me, but that you also don't hear from Jay or from Trey. And I also thought it would be kind of a nice ideological balance to my previous interviews with Sarah Kendzior and Samuel Sinyangwe. But a lot more of the comments were negative, and those negative reactions revolved around a few general themes here. First, that Mr. Schlichter was a sort of a hate spewer whose appearance on the Politics Guys goes against the kind of calm, rational discourse that's really foundational to our show. Second, and kind of related to this, is that I was giving him a platform for espousing irrational and hateful ideas. Third, that it was okay to have him on, but I should have challenged him more. And many listeners said they felt I basically let him just kind of run right over me, and that I was played by a not very good guy who was only looking to sell his books. And after reading all these responses and, corresponding with some folks, I realized I needed to do two things. First, I asked Jay to take a close listen to the episode and let me know what he thought so I could get some perspective. So, Jay, what did you think?
I loved it.
Okay. That's anything you want to add to that?
No, here's the thing. I mean, with these interviews, with everything we do, the goal is to have a discussion and not so much to win arguments. And I'll tell you, I mean, my role when I'm here with Mike talking on Sundays is different than what Mr. Schlichter's role is. His job is to be an advocate and to advocate for what he believes in really the strongest, more visceral sort of way. I mean, his job is to go out and win arguments, whereas my role is to more think back and discuss and analyze. So, look, he's doing something that is a different job, and he's doing his job. I didn't find anything, on the merits that was somehow out of bounds or hate speech or something like that. I think he used more colorful language and maybe stronger language to say what a lot of conservatives feel. And in fairness, I think he was in many ways not a Trump apologist. He was Trump is the lesser of two evils. In fact, use the word evil quite a bit, and we'll get to that. But, look, this is, and also, I mean, Schlichter and Town Hall is not some sort of alt-right outlet. I mean, Town Hall's been around for 20, 25 years. It may have been like the first conservative site on the internet when after Al Gore created it. It's not Alex Jones. It's not Breitbart. And you may disagree with them, and some of the language he uses might be a turnoff. It's not, again, it's not what I would do, but look, if you don't like them, then I mean, and then the goal is to challenge people a little bit to, what their own views are, and again, I think Mike and I would have a pretty big discussion if we had anybody on who was either so wrapped up in espousing conspiracy theories or hate speech or encouraging violence or just, I mean, so really off the rails. I mean, but I don't see Schlichter as being that.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's sort of. Well, I'm glad you felt that way. Certainly. So that was, Jay kind of. You
You should
mentioned
have
to
heard who
me.
we wanted to have on.
Yeah, well,
I'm
you
kidding. Yeah.
mentioned that, that to me previously, and that was very helpful. Now, there was another thing that I also did. Second thing I decided to do. Before I get to that, I want to thank our first sponsor of today's show, which is Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club delivers an amazing smooth shave. You can get high quality blades and amazing shave butter delivered right to your door for an incredible smooth shave. Jay, let me ask you this. What would you say if I pulled five $20 bills out of my wallet and set them on fire? Just set them on
That'd
fire.
be crazy.
That,
That would be crazy.
that would be just really insane. And here's the thing. That's what you're doing at the very least if you're still buying those overpriced gimmicky blades from the store. I mean, I actually sat down and did the math. I used conservative estimates, and it's actually even a little bit more than that. Per year. So why throw that money away when you don't have to? I mean, I bet everyone here, everyone listening can think of better things to do with over $100 a year than burn it up. I know
Yep.
I can, you know? So
And also, I would say not only are you saving that money, you're getting a much better shave
yeah,
and saving inconvenience.
exactly. And you're not just saying that to say it, you're saying that because you use their products, right?
Yep,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
so we both use them. We both think they're in every way comparable. In fact, I would argue better than what I'd experienced previously. And so this is just a great deal on awesome products. And even better, for a limited time, new members get their first month of the Executive Razor with a tube of the Dr. Carver Shave Butter, which is great stuff. Only $5 with free shipping. And after that, your razors are just a few dollars a month. It's a $15 value for only $5. And in that first month's box, you'll get the really nice weighty handle, a full cassette of the 4 executive cartridges, and a tube of shave butter. You can only get this offer now by going to dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. That's dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. Check it out. You'll be really glad that you did. Okay, so the second thing that I did is I listened to the episode myself again. And when I did, I kind of had your reaction, I suppose, but there was one thing that I, in retrospect, wish I'd asked Mr. Schlichter about. And that was his repeatedly calling Hillary Clinton evil. Um, and so I decided, well, why don't I do that? And I reached out to him again, and he agreed to record a short segment with me explaining what he meant when he called Hillary Clinton evil. And so what I thought we'd do is we just play that segment, and Jay, then you and I can talk about it. Sound good?
Can we do something in the post production to make like the evil sound like evil,
Echoey
like
kind
really
of thing.
like
So
reverb and deep voice?
we'll see what we
I
can
just
do
think
about that. Yeah.
that'd be
So,
fun.
okay. All right. So here's what he had to say. On a number of occasions, Mr. Schlichter referred to Hillary Clinton as evil. And so I thought, well, okay, that's something where maybe it would be good to get some context on that. So, Mr. Schlichter, first off, thank you for coming back on to address this. And so, what say you about this? In what sense did you mean Hillary Clinton is evil?
Well, look, I first of all, I appreciate you having me back. I'm glad I stirred up a little controversy, though. I'm not sure where people get the idea that I'm some sort of Alex Jones type. On the in the conservative spectrum, I'm pretty much in the middle, and I don't go with the kind of wacky conspiracy side. Um, the left has its own lunatics, and we have ours. I come from a different direction, but I did characterize Hillary Clinton as evil, and I think it is important to realize why, and why it's not simply rhetoric. Why I'm not just throwing out an epithet. Um, Evil to me, uh, well, and to Webster's, means someone malign, someone with dark motives, someone who is not out to do good. Now, obviously, I believe that Hillary is a deeply corrupt person, but that doesn't make her evil in an exceptional way. Nor is it why I use that term. I mean, there are plenty of politicians who are corrupt, including some of my own party. Uh, so that's not it. I think the reason I use the term evil to describe Hillary Clinton is directly related to her malign intent towards a significant number of Americans who she despises. Now, every once in a while, she'll come out and get caught doing it. The deplorables comment, that was no surprise because that's how she feels. She feels people like me are bad people who must be punished and held away from. Of course, there goes the phone. It's Hillary. Uh, that we are bad people who must be kept from any kind of power, including the power to govern ourselves. Her attack on the First Amendment, both the religious and the speech part, for me is almost unforgivable. Her view of religion is that it is something that we allow you to practice in the privacy of your own home, but it can no way influence your life and certainly can't stand in the way of what she defines as progress. And any desire of a normal American to do so should be met, literally with the power of the state. That's why a lot of conservatives, when they hear liberals complain about something, sneer, "Bake me a cake." The idea that some baker who just doesn't believe that men should get married and doesn't want to make a cake and doesn't want to participate in it should be bankrupt, if not put in jail for expressing that religious view. I think that's unbelievably hateful. Her attack on the First Amendment by embracing Citizens United, which I think is probably the single most appalling and disgusting thing that is one of the current liberal platform planks. The idea that making a movie critical of Hillary Clinton, which is what Citizens United was. It was a declaratory relief action by some people who wanted to make a movie critical of Hillary Clinton that ran afoul of quote unquote campaign finance laws. And, at one point in the first argument to the Supreme Court, the government actually argued, why, yes, we have the right to ban books that might be critical of a politician under these laws. They went and, revisited that after the justices sat there stunned at this idea. But the underlying notion is that Hillary Clinton believes she should be able to use the power of the state, which is men with guns, to go and take the freedom of people who speak against her at a time and place she doesn't approve of, is so horrendous. I can't even, as the millennials say, I can't even. Finally, the notion that she wants to disarm normal Americans to prevent us from protecting ourselves, our families, our communities, and our Constitution, leaving us not citizens but serfs, because she doesn't believe that people like us should have the power to protect our rights. Absolutely. This is a woman who hates us, and that's why I use the word evil.
So then I'm sure, of course, that Hillary Clinton would deny all of this categorically, and I'm guessing that you would say that it sounds to me, if I'm understanding correctly, is that there's this essentially contempt, you might want to call it hate, for certain groups of people that's bubbling right under the surface with Hillary Clinton. And you feel that essentially when she denies these things, it's basically her covering up how she really feels about, say, the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or things like that.
She's not for any of them, but more specifically, she wants to deprive people like me and people who think like me, live like me, believe like me, of those rights. And these are not rights granted to us on some piece of paper. They didn't spring into the existence when the Constitution memorialized them. These are God-given rights given by our Creator, whether you're religious or not. They are natural rights. And it is evil to take natural rights. It is evil to take property from other people without just compensation. It is evil to imprison them without trial. It is evil to inflict cruel or unusual punishment. It is evil to prevent people from speaking freely. It is evil to prevent people from practicing their religion freely. It is evil to disarm people.
Would you agree that we might want to make a distinction between people who are doing this with what may be malign intent and people who are just wrong on policy or facts. Like, for instance, I disagree with you very much so on Citizens United, but I would like to think that I firmly believe that I don't actually have malign intent. It's just maybe a different interpretation of well, various things and so forth. I mean, so you're not saying that anyone who holds those policy
No.
positions is evil.
No, that would be silly. People have the capacity to be wrong about natural rights. I give Hillary more credit. I believe Hillary is smarter than that, in the sense that I believe she knows exactly what she's doing and why she's doing it. And the reason she's doing it is to silence people like me.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kurt Schlichter, for coming back on and clearing this up. I really think that provides a lot of helpful context. I'm sure other people have some comments on this as well, but it was very, very gracious of you to take the time to come back on and clear this up. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. As a big believer in free speech, I think you're doing a real service. I appreciate the chance to talk to people who probably don't hear from a lot of people like me.
Absolutely. And that's what we're all about here on this show. And so that's why I'm glad we could have you on. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thank you. Thank your audience for listening.
Okay, so there we go. That's what Kirk Schlichter had to say about Hillary Clinton being evil. Jay, I'll let you start off. What did you think?
I think he nailed it. I was going to come up with a bunch of other reasons why she's evil, but no, I mean, I think particularly on the First Amendment point, I suppose someone can say, as you did, that there can be people who have a different view of this, as a different legal view, and corporations are different than people and therefore don't have that right. But he makes the conclusion that Hillary's opposition is not so much on that, but it's because she does not like people criticizing her or the government, and I think there's a fair body of evidence to support that. So yeah, I mean, I
guess where I come down on this is I understand where he's coming from, but to me, the word evil is both incorrect, I would argue, and unnecessarily inflammatory. I certainly can understand the viewpoint that that many conservatives hold, that Hillary Clinton has some animus toward them. Perhaps I don't know that I agree with that. But I understand that viewpoint. But to use a word like evil, a word that you would use to describe people like Paul Pot or Idi Amin or Stalin or Hitler, to me, words are incredibly important and incredibly powerful. And I don't want to debase such a powerful word like evil and use it to kind of divide people, when you can make the same sort of point, even if I don't agree with that point, by using language that's not as likely to make people just shut down. And I think that's, the one thing I think where some listeners had a point is that, I agree with Mr. Schlichter that he is actually, in terms of his policy views, pretty standard conventional conservative, but his manner of expressing them definitely is flamboyant, is rambunctious. And while I think that helps people kind of build, bring in people who are naturally attracted to that, if your goal is not to sort of preach to the choir, if your goal is to try to let people understand how you think without sort of trying to push them out at the, from the outset, I think that's not going to achieve it. Now, to be fair, that may not be.
And I'm just going to, I don't, no, go ahead. I want to interrupt.
I'm saying,
go ahead.
To be fair, that's perhaps not his goal, and so I don't want to say, well, he's doing the wrong thing when, his goal could just be to basically provide a forum for fellow conservatives to sort of, explain views and expound on things. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But of course, our mission is different. Right. Our mission is to try to bring in conservatives and liberals. And so in that sense, certainly Mr. Schlichter would not be the kind of person who'd be a great counterpart to me on the show. You're much better at that because of how you view things in your calm, cool, and collected manner and that sort of thing. So I guess that's sort of my reaction to that. But go ahead. You had a point.
What I was going to say is along similar lines. And Yeah, again, from philosophical, ideological positions, I'm pretty much on board with most everything that he said. That is sort of standard issue center right conservatism, and it's the kind of thing you'd find in places like the Wall Street Journal editorial page, or whatever. Most probably a lot of your small town chambers of commerce type folks. I think again, I think that the role that he plays, he's an advocate. He's out there to convince people and to make the arguments, and God bless him. That's and he's there to make it to a certain audience, and everyone has different audiences. If you watch TV a lot, and I suppose I probably do more than I ought to, look at car commercials. If you compare the way a Mercedes commercial is to a Ford F-150 commercial. Look, they're both selling automobiles, but they're selling them to very different audiences, and they have different approaches in doing so. You and I tend to be, and I don't mean this as either to denigrate him or to elevate us, or maybe the other way around, but we're more selling Mercedes, right, and BMWs. He I think is hitting probably a broader market than what we are, and as such, there's a different kind of advertising, a different kind of advocacy that goes on in that kind of market.
Yeah. Speaking of advertising, wow, it's almost like you designed this. I want to
almost.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
I think our second sponsor today, SeatGeek, where you can find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed, and it only takes just a couple of taps on the app, or if you're like me, a middle-aged person, and you're more of a computer guy, just a few clicks through their website, SeatGeek.com. Though I do have the app on my phone, and I do have it bookmarked on my computer, and it gives me all sorts of great recommendations tailored to my specific musical interest, which Jay, I believe you've called eclectic, right? Is that a good word for it? So
I think that's fair. Not bad, eclectic. I mean,
yeah.
You introduced me to a lot of music that I wouldn't have heard otherwise.
Well, and that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Some of it good, some of it not as good.
Exactly. Some hits and some misses. But one of the great things about SeatGeek. One thing I really like is already it's let me know about a number of performers who were coming to Cincinnati, where I live, or right around there, who I would not have heard about otherwise. It's really convenient; just pops right up on my phone. Though if I don't want those notifications, I can turn them off. But I actually like knowing about this, and then once something pops up, I can just go order it. It's super simple, quick, and easy. I've timed it on multiple occasions, less than 30 seconds to go from the point where I just type in the name to buy now. That's great, and plus you can get those updates not just on people but on venues, on events, all kinds of stuff that you want to keep track of. It'll even connect with Spotify, your music library, Facebook, so you can get notifications about artists that you listen to or follow. And again, you can turn that off if you don't like. And then when you buy a ticket, they'll even put the day and the time of that event on your calendar if you want, which I think is really cool. And best of all, you get, as a Politics Guys listener, $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you have to do is download the SeatGeek app, enter code Politics Guy, that's all one word and no S, or you can just do it on their website, SeatGeek.com. That's promo code Politics Guy, and you get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. It's a great deal. Hope you take advantage of it. Okay, so I guess, in the end, I feel like it was a good thing that I brought Kurt Schlichter on the show. I'm glad I did. I understand people's responses to it. And I don't know if I'll have him back on again, though I think it, would be perhaps interesting at some point. He certainly expressed a willingness. And, on a personal level, he was an incredibly nice, gracious kind of guy. This is not, and, we talk a lot about demonizing folks, right? And, and how we are very much against that, of course. And he was personally just a really nice guy, and I enjoyed talking with him. I disagree with him profoundly on policy, and that to me is the great thing, is we can have these profound disagreements on policy and still, on a personal level, be okay with each other. And I think that's a strength of our democracy, and something I think we see less of today than in the past, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's yeah, I think you said it perfectly.
Okay. Well, let's move on from this here and take some other listener mail questions and comments. So, you ready? Okay. Longtime listener Dave writes, "Hi, Mike and Jay. Too bad you lost any subscribers due to your Paris Accord climate discussions. Now, I would like to critique also because that's the joy of listening to a podcast and not trying to produce one." Okay. So he says, "Jay, in defense of state rights, many conservatives like to call states laboratories for democracy." Okay, that's cool. The Heritage Foundation came up with a pro-business healthcare plan that Mitt Romney put into place as governor of Massachusetts, and it worked pretty well. Governor Brown back in Kansas just had a horrific result from cutting taxes and government services, which we talked about in a recent show. California is the third highest oil producing state, the biggest state economy of any state, all the while having the most nanny state stringent environmental laws. But Republicans seem to refuse to accept all evidence produced by these laboratories. If the federal government seems interested in crafting policy based on the data, if I take a wide view, it honestly doesn't seem that Republicans respect the idea of state laboratories at all. Jay, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's an interesting point, but I think maybe you're missing the bigger federal picture. Is that when we talk about, and I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes who coined the phrase "laboratories of democracy." Mike, you can probably check me if I'm wrong, but it was a jurist of that era. It isn't so much that we're going to try this out in the laboratory of a state, and then if it works, well, then we implement it to every state. The idea is states are different, and therefore they can make their own policies and adjust them to the needs of their particular state. For example, you talk about California, and yeah, it's different than say, as I used Nebraska or Iowa. Um, it's a different population, it's different natural resources, it's a different geography, it's different weather, it's all these things. So I think if you can, there's obviously maybe some conclusions that could be drawn from what states do, but those conclusions ought to be applied then to what other states do. They can look at that experience rather than saying, listen, it worked in Massachusetts, therefore it's going to work in the entire country. Again, that's sort of similar to saying the liberal thing of, hey, this works in Sweden, therefore it's going to work everywhere in the United States. I think federalism is designed, and I would use the phrase federalism as opposed to states' rights, but that's the way that I think the founders envisioned this. And quite honestly, the other point is, if you don't like what your state is doing, it's easier and cheaper to get your state law changed. And also, there's always the option of relocating to a different state. I mean, that's probably pretty severe for a lot of people. But it's the idea that, again, people can govern themselves better on a smaller level and more efficiently on a small level. California, I mentioned on the Sunday show, is investigating a single payer healthcare plan, which if I were a Californian, I would oppose it tooth and nail. But as an Ohioan and a sort of federalist, I'm sort of okay, have at it. If it works for them, great, and if Californians like it, great. My sense is it won't work out that well, but regardless, it's Californians doing what Californians want to do, and not trying to transplant that onto the rest of the nation.
I don't disagree with you on that in a lot of respects. One thing I will add, though, is that certainly there is a tendency for, say, conservatives who see successful programs, liberal programs, whether they're in California or Massachusetts or somewhere else, to essentially try to cherry pick data to say, well, it wasn't actually that big of a success, or to try to sort of cherry pick data to say, here's why it wouldn't work here. That's not to discount your point about states being different, because you're certainly right. And I'm not suggesting this is only something conservatives do, but one of the things is that oftentimes, that's not taken into consideration, and people certainly do that. You wouldn't disagree with that.
No, absolutely.
Okay. Now,
and again, it's I think the real conservative position, and not only Republicans in Congress don't always feel this way, but is yeah, the federal government ought to just stay out of as many people's business as possible. And but there's always the temptation of when you're in government that you've got to do something, so you'll take whatever ideas seem to work wherever it seemed to work, and you want everyone to have that have that benefit of that you see or saw somewhere else.
right. Okay, so Dave actually had a comment for me too, so it was going to be equal opportunity.
Oh, good.
He says, Mike, during the climate conversations that you've been having, Jay often says that either the Paris Accord or environmental regulations stifle industry, economic growth, etc. And you treat this as a necessary evil. I don't think that you should cede that point. There's a legitimate argument to be made for encouraging new domestic industries instead of helping the coal industry limp along and the oil industry keep the world polluted and the West dependent on Saudi Arabia, Russia, etc. for fuel. Well, Dave, you're right, and I certainly didn't mean to cede that
you
point.
Get the easy, you get the softball.
Well,
question,
it's because I'm right on this issue and you're not as right. So there you go. But no, I certainly that's a point I've been trying to make. I think that the future, not just in terms of what's best for the planet, but in terms of what's best economically, is in renewables, is in clean energy, is in solar and and wind and other things like that. That's why I think so many businesses are just essentially moving forward with their plans, despite what I think just ridiculous policies from Donald Trump and Scott Pruitt and that whole group that's stuck back somewhere in the 1960s and 1970s. So I absolutely agree with you, Dave, about that. I think economically this is a smarter move. I think even, companies like Exxon have suggested that we're kind of trying to move somewhat in this direction and so forth because they see where the future is too. So if I sounded like I was ceding this point, I certainly didn't mean to because I agree with you very much so on this. So Jay, any thoughts on that?
Well, I other than just where I was before of, if these companies want to pursue those things on their own, more power to them. Look, I'm not someone who thinks, man, what we really need is more emissions. And it's not like I don't think Republicans and conservatives go out and say, I'm just going to light a barrel of oil on fire just because. So if there's private industry out there that's moving in that direction because that's where they think the future is, or that's where they're willing to put their bets. Great, that's good for everyone. But in the meantime, I would just say, and you sort of pointed out that look, they're moving forward despite what Trump says or what the Parisians would say, and which to me brings up sort of the pointlessness of that treaty. Is look, stuff is going to happen on its own, business wise, and if that produces, I mean, if someone invents the perfect solar system next week, well, that person is going to be a zillionaire, and more power to them, and I'll buy stock in the company. So,
yeah. And unfortunately, I think there's more likelihood that that person's going to be from China instead of the United States. Another story. But anyway, Dave ends his email saying, sorry to pile on. I know you've gotten a lot of criticism, but these are conversations worth having. Assuming the consensus of the science is right, if we don't get climate policy right, then who cares about minimum wage and tax codes? And I think that's a really good point. All right, moving on. Listener Joe, she was a very passionate and thoughtful commentator on the Kurt Schlichter interview. She writes, I wanted to let you know that I thought Trey did a great job on the last episode. I think he's a valuable addition to the group. I sort of make a Cheers analogy. Mike and Jay are Sam and Diane, and Trey has become either Cliff or Norm. Trey did, I don't know, I guess that would make...
Which one am I?
Well, he said Mike and Jay are Sam and Diane, so I'm Sam, and that would make you
All
Diane. Right. I kind of like that way. Anyway.
I suppose, all right.
Trey did...
I am the smarter one.
Well, there you go. Trey did a great job leading the episode and giving you a week off in terms of preparation. Keep up the good work. You guys are improving every week. Also, I love the interview episodes as well. Thanks so much. And thank you, Joe. We really appreciate that. Okay, next we have listener Mary Justine commenting on one of our recent episodes, saying, despite a general emotional aversion to the Cuban regime on account of personal histories, can you explain more in depth why so many Cuban Floridians, along with Rubio and other politicians, are so opposed to normalized relations? Also, can you explain the seemingly staunch resistance by Jeff Sessions and others to invoke executive privilege when refusing to discuss conversations with the president? What are the implications of doing so that they seem to be strategically trying to avoid? Thank you. Love the show. Listen religiously. Keep up the thoughtful and nuanced work. So I guess we'll start with the Florida thing. Now, this mostly comes from conservatives, obviously. So, Jay, do you want to take this one?
Well, I don't know that there is a whole lot more, or nor does there need to be a whole lot more, uh, uh, reason for a lot of Cuban Americans to oppose normalization with Cuba. Look, obviously, it is emotional, and if you consider these are folks who lost their homes, lost their property, some were forced to flee, some people fled in peril of their lives. I get that, and I would think they view any sort of uh, 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 I don't know, accession, any sort of um, giveaway or any sort of, that's probably not the best word, any softening to the regime as a sign of weakness, and I understand that. Um, I think the argument can be made, and we've talked about this before, is sometimes is engagement better than the complete shut off. Um, in Cuba, they're going to come down, and the Cuban exile community and their descendants um, come down on the no. In this situation, you can't engage in this with this kind of regime, and it just has to. We have to push it till it falls. So I understand where they're coming from. I don't know that there's anything beyond. I mean, their own personal experience that drives that, and I don't know that they're wrong. I think engagement, if it was done more strategically than it's been done so far, might work, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, I largely agree with you on that. I think that taking sort of a cool sort of backing off and looking at the issue. Yes, engagement is the strategy that makes sense. You and I may differ on what sort of nature that engagement may be, what sort of path it takes, but as you said, for a lot of people, this is a very personal and emotional issue. And it's easy for us living in Ohio, with no family or anything like that in Cuba to say, well, yes, this is what makes sense, whatever that is. But for someone whose, grandparents maybe or families, were killed by this regime or lost everything, that's a lot harder to get to that point. And so I get where they're coming from too. And I think like you, that's in large part what's driving that. Now, as for the Jeff Sessions and executive privilege issue, I think I addressed this a little bit. I think it was last week that this is exactly what, if I were the president, I would expect from one of my subordinates who is being loyal to say as little as possible to make sure that I don't expose my boss to any sort of potential future harm. Now, of course, as a member of the Senate, I would have wanted more information, but I think Sessions is being a good and smart employee in that sense, whatever, and doing right by the president who he's serving. Now, I don't agree with the president or the attorney general, but that's the sort of loyalty that Donald Trump certainly wants and expects, and every president wants and respects. So that's all I think is going on there. Jay?
Well, I think there's that, and I think there also is the idea of Sessions is not only representing the president, he's representing the presidency. And that is something that as time goes on, there are these institutional tensions between the executive and the legislative branch, and those were built into the Constitution, and this is one of those examples. And I think it's incumbent upon each of those branches to sort of defend their turf, just because again, you might not, Trump isn't always going to be the president, and we're executive privileged to be eroded by essentially a big waiver of it. in front of Congress, I think Democrats would miss it years down the road.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. All right. Then there's listener Wayne, who left a comment on our website, politicsguys.com. It was very thoughtful and involved, so I edited it a little bit, but here we go. If you recognize that both environmental damage and terrorism are threats to the United States and our people, then the weakness in Jay's logic during your climate discussion becomes evident. Jay supported Trump's decision to exit the Paris Accords, arguing that the United States is economically disadvantaged by our voluntary commitments to Paris, including financially supporting developing nations' efforts to mitigate environmental damage. Yet, when it came to Afghanistan, Jay advocated strongly for unilateral U.S. military action without regard to the financial and economic implications, not to mention the possible loss of American lives. Jay appears to be willing to continue to expend America's treasure and blood in a country that, as argued on the podcast, appears incapable of establishing a stable and effective government, relegating America's role to an occupying police force that is unwanted. One can argue that whatever happens over there affects us here for both terrorism and environmental damage. Disengagement from an active leadership position with other nations on improving the environment is the same as arguing that my section of the boat is dry while the whole boat is sinking. We need to be working together. Disengagement from the rest of the world, particularly on something that is as universally aligned as the Paris Accords, weakens America both in our ability to achieve needed environmental objectives and creates a dynamic that weakens America's position with other collaborative engagements, for example, the fight on terrorism. Jay's arguments and approach to each demonstrate an underlying set of assumptions that views environmental damage as principally a local problem addressed through capitalist mechanisms, while his approach to terrorism, especially in Afghanistan, appears to require military, not capitalist mechanisms to address. It is my belief that both are serious worldwide problems that require active leadership and participation by the United States. So, Jay, what do you think about that analogy, that comparison?
Wow, I got to tell you, that's a better argument than you made.
Okay, well, there you go.
No, look, I think those are good points. My response would be, first of all, where can we do the most good that we know we're doing the most good? And that is, in the area of terrorism, I think we can say we have more success. We can have a better sense of here's what we're doing, here's the progress we're making, than we can in the environmental level. For example, one of my criticisms of the Paris Agreement has been, even if we did absolutely everything we were supposed to and met all our commitments, even more, there's no guarantee anyone else would do it, nor is there really a guarantee that it would work. Now, I understand there's no guarantees that our anti-terrorist policy would work, but I think there's stronger evidence to say that if you have a metastasizing terrorist threat, and you can deal with it militarily and take it out and stabilize the country, which again, stabilizing Afghanistan is no easy task. And I think we would look at that and say, no, it may well be impossible. But I think the immediate benefits of that are more able to be realized. I would also, whereas with an environmental, the environmental issues, and again, I would draw a line here between really what the science behind the Paris Agreement says and what other environmental prophets of doom, Al Gore and so forth, say. That listen, things even assuming we have a rise in temperature of 1 to 2%, I think the effects, the claimed effects, are greatly exaggerated for political purposes. And there are steps that can be taken to mitigate those steps or mitigate that damage that are going to be cheaper and more effective in the long run than curtailing our industry. So that's where I come down to that. But I would say that's a really good argument. And nothing is certain, but I see more certainty in the war on terrorism than I do in our agreeing to this particular non-binding agreement.
Okay. Now, if I understand your position on climate change policy, which I think I have a pretty reasonably good grasp on, at least, one of the things that you've said a number of times is that you feel that it's going to be easier for us to deal with this issue in the future because technologies will be invented and so forth, that will make it easier for us to mitigate the effects of this sort of thing. And if that's right, I guess you'd say that that's not the case. While that is the case for the environment, that's not the case for terrorism, where if we just let it go longer, we're going to develop better technologies to deal with terrorism.
Right. I don't see. I mean, unless we come up with some really cool super weapon that can analyze who is a Islamic jihadist extremist and a la sort of a Minority Report type thing, take them out beforehand. No. In terms of the idea of capitalism, I support capitalist approaches to improving the environment, but not in Afghanistan. I would say absolutely we ought to have capitalist solutions to places like Afghanistan, but those won't take root until you take out the guys with guns, and that necessarily, I think, means a military response or a military presence to get that baseline security before you can even talk about these other longer term investments and opening up a society and having a functioning marketplace and a functioning democracy.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned a functioning marketplace and a functioning democracy. I mean, that of course is one of the other problems. Is just because you can kind of tamp down the threat, the military threat, unless those institutions are there and are strong and are stable. We talked about this. We talked about this in our Sunday show, right? What happened in Venezuela, what happened in Russia, and so forth. And you can throw tons of money, tons of resources into that, but as long as that's not there, it's going to be throwing it down a hole, basically, because you're never going to get where you want to get to without that. And there's not a whole lot of I don't have a whole lot of faith in that happening in Afghanistan without us spending orders of magnitude more than we're spending right now. And I would rather have us spend that money on the environment, which I think is number one, a greater threat. So you and I disagree on the science and so forth on that, but then on throwing our money down this kind of hole of Afghanistan. But
well, if we're talking about government investment in Afghanistan after it's secured, yeah, I'd probably agree with you. But if we make it safe for private investment, you may see people try to go in and create some kind of private investment, or you may not. I mean, again, I think Afghanistan is one of those places that has never had democratic institutions to sort of fall back on, or that will just sort of regrow once the Taliban is gone. They've got to be created from scratch, and it's got to be sort of organic. Now, it's a weird sort of thing, because you can look at places like Southeast Asia, or not Southeast Asia, more Northeast Asia, in Korea and Japan, that didn't necessarily have those democratic institutions, but we stayed around a while and they adopted them, and they've grown and are strong. But regardless, yeah, for Afghanistan it's going to be, a decades, perhaps centuries before they're really, have those kind of institutions. And maybe the best we can do in the interim is to stop the spread of the ideology and prevent a terrorist base from growing there. Likewise, there's only so much we can do environmentally and on our own. I do appreciate, though, the idea of the being the leader of the coalition, and I think that's important. And I think you made that same point that what Paris accomplishes is just more the continuation of an engagement rather than any particular policy goals. What I would like to see would be maybe the U.S. step up in a leadership role to work on a different type of response to climate change, rather than just the typical, here we're going to limit carbon emissions in each country and hope that those countries comply. So
right, another issue for another show, certainly.
Yeah.
And of course we're kind of pushing up against it. In fact, Well, we do appreciate the question. I think, I agree with you that was, Wayne had a great way of putting that. And certainly we both agree that climate change and terrorism are two very important international issues, and they are both very, very difficult issues for sure. All right. Well, that does it for this Politics Guys episode. We hope you liked what you heard and that you will check out today's sponsors. The first is Dollar Shave Club. New members get their first month of that executive razor, tube of Dr. Carver shave butter for only $5 with free shipping. And after that, razors are just a few bucks a month. That's a $15 value for only $5. And to take advantage of this offer, go to dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. That's dollarshaveclub.com/TPG. Also, SeatGeek, the fast and easy way to get great tickets to live events at a great price. Politics Guys listeners, you get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app or go to SeatGeek.com and enter promo code PoliticsGuy, all one word, no S, today. That's promo code PoliticsGuy for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. And if you've got questions, comments, corrections, or just random thoughts you want to share with us, you can reach us at mail@politicsguys.com. Our Facebook page where you can message us and where we post throughout the week is facebook.com/politicsguys page. We're also on Twitter @politicsguys. We'll be back with a new show next week. We hope you'll join us.